a Fiat
Yes.
from Italy.
Yeah. We used to have Fiat
Yeah.
in Thailand,
Yeah,
but not
yeah.
anymore. Not anymore.
Right, and they've come back to the United States, and this is was called a Fiat 850 Spider.
Wow. Yeah.
And it uses the small little four-cylinder engine in the rear, and is just a two-seater. And they were made from 1967 to 1973. And this is the basic engine shape and configuration and chassis that they used on the Fiat 500, Fiat 600. But they wanted a little sports car primarily to sell in the United States. So they took the basic configuration of the 500, in essence chopped the top off, put a real nose on it, and these were primarily sold in the United States. Now they had a terrible problem with rust.
Oh, rust.
And,
Yeah,
and,
because it's old.
and they were actually recalled. The United States government forced Fiat to recall them because of rusting in the floor pans. And so there aren't a lot of them that survived because they rotted so bad, and then they were recalled and all that. So I had a number of them over the years. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, you could buy them cheap for $100, and they were usually rotted, but you could find parts and this and that, and
Really?
this one wasn't bad, and so I fixed it all up and restored it. And
It still looks good.
yeah,
Good condition.
it's dirty right now because it's just been sitting all winter, and I got to do a little work to a couple of little problems. But I went through and I restored it. We did all the body work on it. There was a little bit of rust, but not much, and we fixed all that and redid the bumpers and the chrome and all that. But I did all that back in the 80s. It's been like this since then.
So to restore like a painting of body, how much did it cost you?
Well,
Because I heard in here it's very expensive to do that.
Again, what happened was I had a friend who had a body shop.
Okay.
And so on Saturday I would go over to the body shop, and I would
you do
manual labor of sanding and things like that.
Okay.
And then he would, during the week, spend a little time, and if there was a small rust repair, he'd do the welding on it.
Wow.
And then I'd come in and I'd, finish it and do the sanding and the labor. So it didn't cost me a lot. It was just, a few of his hours, and then the paint and his time to do that sort of stuff. But I did a lot of the work, so it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that expensive to do that then. But again, this was back in the early 80s.
So you did this one on 1980.
Right, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's still good.
Well, we did a lot of work to make it correct.
Yeah.
And he did a very good paint job on it. He wasn't the world's best painter, but he knew how to do a good paint job.
I agree.
So at the time, this was the paint type is called enamel, and they don't use it that much anymore. And it's what they call a one-step. So the color was all in the paint. They didn't put down the color first and then a clear coat over it. And he put a number of layers down, and so we'd prime it. We'd sand it, we'd prime it, we'd sand it, then put color down and sand it, and color and sand it. And when you build the layers like that, it gives you a finish that will hold up very well over a long period of time.
I agree.
So that's why it's still in very good condition, is because we did it the right way. But it was a lot of labor and a lot of hours.
Yes, sure. I think it's gonna take about a year to finish it.
Well, this car was actually in the body shop for 6 years.
Oh, 6 years.
Because again, it was just part-time. I'd go over there on Saturday and work.
I understand.
And, if the holidays, I didn't go there. It was hot the summer, I didn't go. So, it wasn't every week even. It was just a lot of them. So
according I saw the engine, so it means it's still good. I mean,
Oh,
good
yeah.
running, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yep. Yeah, it runs fine.
And for about the original part, the Fiat company still produce it.
No, Fiat does not produce anything for this car, but because the engine this is a 903 cc.
Okay,
Now
less than a
the
thousand.
Fiat 500 little sedan had a 500 cc engine.
Okay.
Then they bumped up that made it the 600, and it was a 600 cc. The original one of this was an 850 cc.
Oh.
So all they did was they just kept making them a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger.
Of cylinder.
Right.
Oh,
And now this
piston.
one was the biggest engine they used in these, which is a 903 cc. So for American purposes, very small still, but compared to the original 500s, it was almost
Correct.
twice as large.
Yes, correct.
So, over time they did make more power in them, but it's still very small. There's not a lot to it. But it's fun. And again, it's very
sure.
light. There's
Yeah.
not much car there. So
Yeah.
it's got good power for the size of the car.
So what about the suspension? Because it's going to be really, really tough for you to find a part for
Well,
suspension.
again, because it's based on the 500, there were millions of those built. And over in Italy, there were many people who did,
Do the
parts
aftermarket.
for them, aftermarket parts,
Okay.
things like that. And so for quite a while, most all of the parts, mechanical wise, you could get without too much trouble. And there were all the used ones, because again, so many of them ended up in the junkyard. That that's what I did for years. I kept them running with parts from the junkyard too. So,
Wow.
but again, very simple, not a lot to it, but a fun little car in the summertime.
Yeah.
So,
It's nice, convertible. I like it.
Yeah.
It's small one, engine on the back, and it's antique.
yeah, it is.
I like it.
This one's old because this is in 1971. So this will be 50 years old this year.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's same my age.
So anyway, now the one next to you that I'm in the process of restoring, that's a 1971 Lotus Elan
Oh, Lotus.
from England. Yes.
Yes, I like it.
Yeah. And so that's a one-piece fiberglass body,
Yes.
and there's a steel frame that goes underneath it, which is actually buried underneath the boxes there.
Wow.
Is the frame. And so this one, I've been doing all the work myself, as far as it did have a little bit of body damage here in the door and in the fenders and some other places. And I haven't worked on it recently, but I did a lot of work as far as sanding it all down and prepping it and doing the repairs. And most of the parts are all on the shelves there in the back, as far as the suspension and the engine parts and things like that. So.
Steering wheel, I don't know how do you call this one, but
This would be the drive shaft.
Oh,
that
drive
connects
shaft.
The engine to
Okay.
the differential in the back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these are the carburetors here.
Oh.
Yeah. This would be the rear suspension.
Oh.
And someplace the hubs for that. And so there's that's most of the parts for it. The engine block was sitting here someplace. I don't even know where I put it now. I hid it out of the way.
So what is the model of Lotus?
This uses a front engine,
Okay.
and the motor is a Ford engine that they used in the Cortina, the Ford little sedan.
Cortina
in
is
England.
long time ago, right?
Right. The Ford Cortina used a 1600 cc engine.
16.
Right. Well, Lotus bought the bottom part of the engine, and then they built a special head for it, which had two cams in it. So instead of being a cam down in the block with push rods, it had a Lotus twin cam with two big carburetors on it. So out of a fairly small engine, they got a lot of power. And again, these are very light cars. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, you can
Yeah.
pick the whole car up with two people. And so with the good power and very lightweight, they were very, very quick cars and handled very well.
I'm
also
sure.
because they were four-wheel independent suspension. And these were produced from 1964 up to 1973 also. This one is a 1970, so it's a later model. So it had some of the updates as far as safety regulations, as far as seat belts and side marker lights and some things like that on it that the original 64s didn't have. But if you look at one of these in a picture and you look at a Mazda Miata, first Mazda Miatas,
I know.
They copied this. It looks just like these. Yeah, and it had the
You mean
original Miata
the
had,
size? The
size is the same, had the 1600cc engine in it, four-wheel independent suspension. So really what Mazda did is they just copied this 30 years later. So I've got this one, and then it's hard to see, but around the corner there, this is a 1990 Honda CRX SI.
Oh, CRX, I like it.
Yep. And this one here is original. Has not been modified other than I bolted in a roll cage because I actually used to race this on the track, but it's full street car. It's street tires, street legal. You weren't allowed to modify them at all. All you could do is put in the roll cage and the shoulder harnesses and you race them like that. So it's all just the original Honda.
Yeah, Honda
CRX SI.
Yeah, it's SI.
Yep.
Wow.